Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be showing off my dividend estimator. So what this Python program is going to do is it's going to help you estimate what your dividends could be coming up in the future. Now this is totally not to be used as any kind of investment advice or anything like that. This is just to use some statistical features in order to give an idea of where your dividends could be coming up. It's going to take in an input file. Again, it's going to be a JSON file. So it's going to be an array of securities, basically. You're going to have this, each security will have a ticker. I made up a FinDog stock. And actually change that. I gave it the name wan't, and it has a dividend list. So from the oldest to the newest dividend, I'm saying this is the list. So I gave a 95-cent one, $1, 50 cents per share, 65 cents per share, all the way up then to 85 cents per share. Here's what just an empty one, and I'll show you what this looks like. So if we hop over to our terminal, so it's going to you do Python and then the name of the program. And it's going to be inputSample is the name of my JSON file. So it's going to give me a list of all of the valid tickers that I have. In this case, it's only FD, so I can enter that one. Let's say I have 100 shares. So it's going to say, okay, FD, with the name of wan't. It'll search through and find the smallest dividend that existed, the average dividend, the largest one, and then whatever the last dividend was. So let's say you know what the next dividend is going to be, put it there in the last, and you actually get what it is going to be for however many shares that you say you have. So in this case, for the smallest, if that's the next dividend that's going to get paid out, or estimating it, then let's say, okay, we're going to go on the low end, roughly $50. If we're going to go with the average, then it'd be $75. If it is the largest, which was $1, that means I'm going to get $100. And if it's the last one, then it'd be $85. Now I can enter whatever my desired total dividend amount is. So whatever this number would be when you have all of your shares together. Let's say I want it to be 1,000. Well, now it's going to do a little backwards math. So based on these same amounts, smallest, average, largest, and last, it's going to say, okay, you need 2,000 shares if it's going to give 50 cents per share dividend, and so on and so forth. It also says, okay, well, because you've already entered this 100, we're going to assume you own those, then you would need 1,900 more shares to get to here, and so on and so forth. So with the largest one, supposedly be 1,000. I subtract 100 from that, so I would need to have 900 more. Again, we're not saying you should do any of this. This just gives you an idea. It's just a calculator that gives you all this information from that. If we jump back here and we make up another one, let's say we've got FD and we have some A shares. Let's say you stop here and you run the program again. It's still only going to show the FD. So just stop that. You need to have at least one price in here. So let's give it 55 cents. You don't have to put 0 in front, but I like to. Now if we run the same thing, I can now do fd-a. We'll say I've got 20 shares. Now all of it's gonna be the same, obviously, because that's how the statistical math works in that. And we'll say I want $500 this time. And so that's what it's going to look like. There's no limit on how many dividends you have in here. So you can put as many dividend history of dividends in here that you would like. It'll go through all of them. So how does that code actually look and work? So again, we want to tell the program that it's a Python program. We have some libraries. We're going to, again, skip down to the bottom real quick. We'll come back to the functions. So we have our JSON input file, which is going to be the first argument that we give the program, or the first parameter. We have, then we're going to take the securities and we're going to load in that JSON input file. We're going to cycle through the securities, and as long as the input, or as long as the security dividends list is more than 0, then we'll print that to the screen. And we'll ask the user, please select a ticker, and we'll store that in ticker. We then have the selected security. We're just going to set it to 0 to start. And then you will cycle through and find that, again, we probably could have put these in a dictionary or something to begin with, but we just did this because we're not cycling through a ton, so it's not, we're not really looking for optimization at this point. So we then set selected security to be whichever security matched. Then we are going to, so as long as it doesn't equal 0 still, then we're going to get the shares. So we're going to ask the user, please enter the share quantity. Then we're going to print out the ticker and the name. And then we're going to use these functions up here. So we're going to print dividend estimates. We're going to pass in the shares and the dividend list. So if we go to print dividend estimates, we get our dividend array. We're actually going to call the function right above it and pass in that array. So it's going to be, we want to return an array that has 4 values: the smallest, the average, the largest, and the last. So our dividend array starts with 1,000 as the first dividend, because we're going to work our way down to get to the smallest dividend. The next one is just the average, so we'll set it to 0. The largest we set at 0 as well. And then the last one, we just get the last in the dividend list. So in order to get the last element, you're going to get the length of, so you're going to say dividend list, and this is all going to be trying to get the index. So use the function len, length, short for length, of this list, and then subtract by 1. Because if you have a list of this size 3, the last index will actually be 2. So then we're going to also start with our all dividends at 0. So this is going to help us get that average. So we want to add them all up together and then be able to divide it by that length as well. So we set it to 0. Now we cycle through the dividend list. So for the first one, this is where we want to find the smallest. We're going to check, is this dividend smaller than the dividend in position 0? If it is, then set it to be this dividend. Likewise, for the index of 2, or the third element, we're going to check, is this bigger? So we're going to work our way up. Same thing, if it is bigger, then set it to be that. That's how we're going to find our smallest and our largest. Every time we want to add whatever that dividend is to our all dividends value, and then we'll take all those dividends divided by the length of the list to get our average, and we'll set that to the second space, or second index, or index of 1. So we now have this set. We have our smallest set, our average set, our largest set, and our last. We then return that array. That gets us back to here. And this is pretty simple. We just print some some hard-coded text. We go through the array. It's going to give us a big number because we divided it, or with a lot of decimals, not really a big number, but a lot of decimals. So we're going to round it to 4 decimals for each index. And we're going to make it a string. You have to put that when we're concatenating it with the rest of the string parameters. Then we're going to add per share for total, so some more strict text, or hard-coded text, if you will. And then we're going to take the shares, but they're entered in, so we need to turn into a float or decimal number. Multiply that by the dividend array amount. And then we're going to limit it to just 2 decimals at this point because we're actually going to get a price. The reason I do this is because a lot of dividends go to 4 decimals. And so I want to give them as much to go as far as possible. However, when you actually see your total price, you want it just to be in normal price format. Then we just turn it to string. So we do that for all of them. That brings us back down here. So we've printed that out. Then we want to ask them to enter desired total dividend amount with no commas. And then I just added a new line character here. Now we're going to call print shares estimates. We're going to pass in the total dividend, which is what they just entered. We're going to pass in the dividend list and the shares that was entered before. So print shares estimate. We're going to go up there and get the dividend array again. There's probably a better way that we could have held on to that. I just chose not to at this point. Then we have our shares array. So we're going to take our total dividend and divide it by our array that we got from up here. So for the smallest, average, largest, and last. So we're going to preload that into here and make sure that this is, again, a float. So now we have another array with 4 indexes. We now print the smallest, average, largest, and last. So just like before, we print that out. Nothing changed there. We're now going to get the share count. So from the new shares array, we want to round that again to our 4 decimals. Whenever we're talking about share count, because of partial shares, we want to go as far as the standard is. It's usually 3 or 4 decimals out. And then it'll tell us how much they'll need to meet that based off of how many shares they've already entered in. So we take whatever that big number is going to be for that specific index, subtract it by the shares that they said they've entered. Again, we're just going to round it to 4 decimal places, make it a string, and print it out. And that is how the program works. Feel free to add a file writer, write this to a file because maybe you want to go through a whole bunch of securities. Maybe you want to add another input where you can give it a whole list of amounts you actually own, or you can just update the current input file list. I thought about doing that, but I want this to be pretty universal, so you can kind of just run one at a time as you're trying to figure out what maybe your next dividend is going to be. Again, this is only for entertainment purposes, really, and just estimations, so don't use any of this as actual investment advice. Have some fun, and let me know what changes you make. Thanks.